When someone asks, how do I use case studies in thought leadership articles, what they're really asking is, how do I prove my expertise without sounding promotional and actually build trust with the right audience? Most people get this wrong. They think that case studies are something that you post, something that you promote, that you put in front of people and try and convince them, and that's exactly why they don't work. When you lead with a case study, it feels like a testimony. It feels like you're selling something, and people immediately put their guard up. So in this episode, I'm going to show you the right way to use case studies in your thought leadership content. Let's dive right in. Now, I want you to understand where case studies actually belong. The best way to build thought leadership is to create content based on the exact questions that your audience is already asking. Not broad topics, not general advice, but specific, clearly worded questions that people are searching on platforms like Google, YouTube, and ChatGPT. When you create content that directly answers those questions asked by your target audience, that content gets discovered. Now here's where the case studies come in. You don't start with the case study, you start with the question that your dream clients are asking. And once you're answering that question, the case study naturally becomes the best way to illustrate the answer. So it's not a promotion, but it's a proof. Instead of just explaining what works, you're showing what actually happened. You're taking something that could feel just like theory and turning it into something real. Now, for this to work, the case study has to be a natural fit. It should feel like this is the clearest way to answer this question, instead of, let me tell you about my client. So when you do it correctly, something very powerful happens. The viewer doesn't feel like they're being sold to. They see themselves in the example. They understand the process. They believe that the outcome is possible for them, and they start to imagine what it would be like to get the same result. So that's where trust is built. There's a few important things that you need to get right. First, your case studies have to be real. No exaggeration, no inflated results, no made-up stories, because the moment that trust is broken, everything else will fall apart. This will just be worthless for you. So second, the structure needs to be clear. You're showing where someone started, what problem they had, and what was done, right? So where did they start, where did they end, and what was that transformation in between? The transformation is what makes the case study meaningful, so not just the result. The journey from one point to the other. Okay, the third thing you got to pay attention to is you have to stay aligned with the question. If the case study doesn't directly support the answer, then it probably doesn't belong there. Okay, so let me show you what this looks like in practice. I want to introduce you to Jason Schroeder, and before I take you to YouTube, I want to show you the spreadsheet that he and I created to really map out the strategy. Now what we're looking for is questions that people are asking in his industry. He's a consultant to the construction world. So these are all the specific questions that contain the words construction manager salary. This is what I call a branch, and it's just one branch of dozens or even hundreds that we found. But we go really deep like this. We find questions that are being asked online on Google, YouTube, and ChatGPT that are really specific to Jason's expertise and that match his target audience. So now let me show you this on YouTube. If you go to YouTube and you type in this question, you'll see Jason Schroeder ranking at the top. Or if we type in that question, here's Jason ranking at the top again. I'm going to fly through a whole bunch of these. You'll see Jason ranking all over the place on YouTube with all of these questions. Just keep going through. There's another, there's another, there's another, and another, and another. So if we had more time, I could show you that he's ranking on Google, he's ranking on ChatGPT. I could show you his progress over time. Now, this is a case study of mine that I'm showing to you on how to build thought leadership. Now, the question that you have is, how do I use case studies to build that thought leadership? And hopefully you can see how to do that, where you take the question that people are asking and you make a video to answer that question. So it's content that your dream clients want you to create, and then you can show them a case study as it matches the question that they're asking. So in that case study, what you saw is not just content, it's positioning. We identified questions that people in the industry are asking, and then we created content that directly answered those questions. And then we use real examples to reinforce the answer. So as a result, the content gets discovered, it builds trust, and it positions you as the authority in your space, not through promotion, not through proof. So if you compare that to how most people work with case studies, they put them on social media, they put them in paid ads, or they put them in front of people who aren't looking for them, what happens is that people scroll past. They ignore it, or they put their guard up because it feels like they're being sold to. But contrast that with someone who is actively searching for a solution, and then your content shows up, you start answering their question, you reinforce it with a real example. It's just a completely different experience. Now they're leaning in. Now they're paying attention, and now there's this relationship of trust that's being built. So if you want to use case studies effectively, don't treat them as standalone content. Use them as proof inside the content that's already being discovered. That's when it can actually transform your content. It can go from information to authority. If you want to understand what this actually leads to and why this approach works so differently than everything else, then I recommend you watch the next episode. It's called What Are the Benefits of Personal Branding? In that video, you can expect to have a paradigm shift in the way that you view personal branding, and you'll see what's actually possible in building your thought leadership. I'll see you there.